Greetings, ladies and germs. Welcome to another live broadcast of Coffee and Propaganda. I am Duncan King. We are going over again some male hatred propaganda on YouTube, Facebook. The first post we're going to look at was found in a group called Feminism on Facebook. And this was by the administrator of the group. Get over to the, here it is. And she says, women have mental health issues, but they just don't seem to pick up guns and shoot dozens of people. Well, okay. Neither do men, though. You fucking bigot. 1/10 of 1% of men in our society have engaged in any kind of murder or mass shooting, which means that 99.9% have not. And I don't consider it an extreme word to use in this situation to call such a person a bigot. Put this in your textbooks, put this in your gender studies textbook, in your women's study textbook, put a little post-it note, write this down, put it in there. To say that any group of people, any demographic group, is more likely, is commonly violent, or is commonly oppressive, is bigotry. If this were a comment about the black community, like if this said, men or white people have mental health issues, but they just don't seem to go around and start gangs and have gang violence and shoot people on the streets, people would obviously see that is a bigoted statement. Or ask, let's say, they ask Jesse Jackson to condemn gun violence or something like that. People would see that as obviously bigoted. But this woman feels perfectly comfortable saying it. Even though 99.9% of men have never shot anyone in their lives and never committed a murder, this 1/10 of 1% have done it. Now, as far as the mental health issues, you're not in a position to make that diagnosis. Most of these guys kill themselves after the fact or kill themselves in the act of the murder when you're talking about a mass shooting. So how could you diagnose them? Did someone have a mental health screening right before they went and did the mass shooting? There's no way to know that. Problem here is that when we think of mental health or mental illness, that word has a certain stigma and conveys things to the public, at least, that the term doesn't necessarily convey. For instance, when we think of mental illness, we think of things like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. These are things where, or disorders where a person is totally impaired in their sense of reality to the point that they don't know what the fuck's going on. Or when we think of mental illness, we'll also think of the criminal verdict of someone being insane, which is a legal term, not actually a psychological term. Within the realm of mental illness, you also have what are called personality disorders. Mass shooters are misanthropes. This is not a psychological diagnosis, but it's a characteristic of their personality makeup. It could be misanthropes because they are antisocial, have antisocial personality disorder. They could be misanthropes because they're suicidal in their ideology. Part of going on a mass shooting is it's kind of a suicidal action. Whether you kill yourself at the end of it or not, you're still destroying your own life by the action. It's kind of an fuck it all kind of behavior. But they also have this misanthropic element. And misanthropy is the hatred of human beings, hatred of society, the hatred of all people. I delve into this in my short film, which you can find on my Debunking channel. I'll put a link to it in the description, where I made an adaptation of, what's the guy's name? I made a whole film about him, and I can't remember his name. Sewell, the Virginia Tech shooter. I made a whole film I basically adapted his play. He wrote a play called Richard McBeef, which was released to the public shortly after he committed the murders, where it's about a father and son, and they're interacting, and at the end, the father hits the son, and it's the stepdad hitting the son. In the play, the son basically calls the father every male disparaging word or term that you can think of, or says any kind of, he basically thinks of any kind of bad thing you can say about any man. He says it to this guy. He says that he's premature ejaculating, can't keep a job, he's a sexual predator, he's a loser, he can't keep his wife satisfied, anything you can think of. He's a dick. He just goes through this gamut of anti-male statements that he blurbs to this guy. The play is an excellent study into the psychology of an individual, a young man who would do what the Virginia Tech shooter did. And I highlight this in my adaptation of the play that is only available on YouTube. I didn't make it to make money. I made it just to highlight an important issue, and also for filmmaking experience too. And obviously my equipment wasn't so great, but people have praised my performance, and I play Richard McBeef, and I play his son, and I play his wife in the play. So you want to check that out, check out the link in the description that I'll put for that play. But what I'm talking about here is that what you can discover by looking at the Richard McBeef play, The Mind of the Virginia Tech Shooter, is that this is a young man who hates himself. He hates his own masculinity. He hates everything about his gender. He is a self-hating male. And misanthropy is caused in a lot of cases by people who feel like they can never get a fair shake in society. No matter what they do, people see them as creeps, they see them as losers, they just can't seem to fit in anywhere they go. Now, granted, the Virginia Tech shooter had some other mental issues besides this, but I don't doubt that his male self-hatred played a big role in what he did. And individuals like this, who post things like this, are not helping. They're part of the problem. When you imply that men, the 1/10 of 1% of men who commit homicides, are indicative of the whole of masculinity, you are perpetuating this hatred of men, this view that men are violent, criminal people that we should avoid and fear. That is bigotry, and you are part of the problem when you say something like that. A lot of comments we have below this. Only white males need an excuse for their behavior. I raped her because she drank, asked for it. How is an excuse for behavior saying someone has a mental illness? Because as I talked about, there's different kinds of mental illnesses. There are personality disorders that play a role in mass shootings, and you can't diagnose. By the very act of doing something like a mass shooting, you have to have a mental disorder. A mental disorder is basically defined as a behavior that causes someone to not be able to function properly in society, or a person, or a characteristic, and a mental characteristic or a mental aberration that causes a person to not be able to function in their own skin, or it's unwanted by them. And there can't be anything that you could say that is less functional in society than shooting up a school, or shooting up a hospital, or shooting up an airport, or something like that. It's pretty non-functional. So by the very fact that they engaged in the behavior, they by definition have a mental illness. You can't do what they did, what the Virginia Tech shooter did, or any of the Columbine shooters, or any of these shooters did, without having a mental illness of some kind. Usually it's a personality disorder. We just don't kind of think of personality disorders as mental illness. Hating society, or hating yourself, or hating the world, or not being able to function well in the world, we don't think of those as mental illnesses, but technically they are. They're personality disorders. Narcissism is a personality disorder. Let's go to another comment, another post here. This one is about women in Mongolia. And it says, these strong women of Mongolia are ready to take on the patriarchy. Okay, so we're saying the women of Mongolia are oppressed by a patriarchy. Well, let's see what's going on here. G-Name was 23 the first time she said the word vagina. It was 2011, and she had recently joined a new women's rights group in the Mongolian capital of Uname. For their initial project, the group decided to stage the Vagina Monologues, a play where women speak about their vaginas. The topic isn't something Asian and Mongolian would usually talk about, because it's crazy, says Z-Name, the group's co-founder. So she assigned the women homework after rehearsal. Cast members were told to use mirrors to say hi to their vaginas. 6 years later, B-Name, who is 34 and speaks fluent English, laughs at the memory. Our first project was crazy. But after nothing is crazy for us. The fact that women would be seen as weird for talking to their vaginas in a mirror has nothing to do with the idea that we hate vaginas. It's just fucking weird. We dissuade that behavior because it's strange, it's bizarre, it's crazy, not because we hate vaginas. Imagine if men did a performance where they were talking to their penises, and they held mirrors up to their penis and were having a conversation with their penis. Imagine how that would be received by the woman who wrote this article. Would she receive it in the same way that she's talking about these women? Oh boy, they're strong. Boy, they have confidence. No, she'd be saying that these guys are just like full of themselves and their own genitalia worshiping their big cocks like they're big fucking studs. Fuck them. These guys are probably rapists, talking to their penises and having their penises in a camera. Whatever the case may be, I'd say that they're pretty freaking weird if they did that. But I'd say the same thing about these women too. They're just weird. We would encourage that, talking to your vagina in the mirror on stage, because it's weird. And the fact that this performance was received well in the country of Mongolia is indicative of the fact that they're not living in a patriarchy. If men did that same thing, nobody would go to it, and certainly nobody would write an article about it. It would just be seen as these freaking weird guys were talking to their penises. Nobody would say, hey, boy, that's strong. These guys are so strong. Strong women are not new to Mongolia. Unusual for a developing country, Mongolia women are actually better educated than men, accounting for 62% of college, university, and institute graduates in 2015, according to the National Statistics Office. They have lower rates of unemployment than their male counterparts, and on average live 75.1 years, a decade longer than men. And they're living in a patriarchy. It's so utterly ridiculous and so shameless in how these gynocentrists view the world. As I often say, some people are so gynocentric that a woman could literally be beating a man to death for no reason, to take his wallet or something, and people would see her as being oppressed somehow. You got this country where the women are living 10 years longer than the men, which is crazy. That's much worse than it is in America as far as our lifespans go. So there's something really seriously wrong with the guys there. If they're, the men's health, if they're only living to be 65 and the women are living to be 75. And also, they're accounting for 62% of college graduates. So the men there are accounting for, my bad math skill, 38%. And lower rates of unemployment. You're not living in a fucking patriarchy. That's a matriarchy. That's a society where you have all the fucking breaks and the men do not. And this is not accounting for the common male statistics that are likely happening in Mongolia, as they happen in America and most Western societies. Now, obviously, Mongolia is not a Western society, but it's a modernized Eastern society. But obviously, the men there are probably most of the imprisoned also, as they are everywhere else. They're probably also more of the homeless, as they are everywhere else. Probably more of the drug addicted than they are everywhere else. And you live 10 years longer than they are, and you're 62% of college graduates, and you're less unemployed. But it's a patriarchy. It's just so ridiculous. They're so out and so blazant and so out in the open with their prejudice that they don't even feel bad about it. They're just like, whatever. Let's go to a video here. This one's hard for me to watch. I tend to want to puke about halfway through it. It's so terrible. It's so bigoted, but we'll take a look at it anyway. This is, I'm forgetting the actress's name. She did this on Conan O'Brien. Now, before I show this, I'm going to comment first of all, because otherwise I'm going to be pausing the video so often to say this. This is not like Chris Rock. This is not like Sarah Silverman, who do risque comment about racial issues or sexist issues. Some of it depends upon some of it of an understanding of nuance. But when they talk about being Jewish or black or something like that, their character on stage is actually the brunt of the joke. Their character on stage is presented as being a ridiculous person. This woman's not doing this. She is saying things she honestly believes. The target of the humor here is the people she's talking about. Not herself, not a character she's playing. She genuinely hates these people that she's speaking of, and just presenting her hatred, her rant here, as comedy because she's doing it on a comedy stage. Let's take a look at this. This is pretty disgusting.
What a weird we're living in. I just hope all the president.
I'm sorry, there was a little problem there. I'll start
All
again.
this Trump stuff doesn't make it even harder in the future for men to become president. Poor men. Aw. Poor men. You guys.
Oh, poor men who comprise 8% of the homeless and 97% of the imprisoned. She says poor men. So we've got men becoming president. This is an issue that benefits approximately, let me see, living right now, we've got Obama, Bush, Trump, Clinton, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush. So 6 men in the entire country have been able to benefit from a society that prefers a male leader over a female leader, being most generous to feminist philosophy. The reality of it is that women just don't run for office as much. They're not as interested in politics as men are. When there's an election and a woman runs against a man, she has no less of a chance of winning against a man as she does against a woman. There have been numerous studies on this. When a man runs against a woman, he has no more chance of winning than when he runs against a man. Our society is not prejudiced against women in elections. They have not won. They do not fill that many seats of Congress and the Senate and the presidency because they just don't run as much. They're just not as interested. And the men becoming president is something that's benefiting six men in the entire country have been president of the United States at some point in their lives. Say poor men. Talking about the whole gender as a whole and degrading them based upon the reality that 6 men in the entire country have become president. When 80% of the homeless are men are a majority of a drug addicted. Over 90% of prisons are filled with men. Men are the majority of people dying in wars. Majority of people dying in workplace accidents. We're men. And gets a little joke and laugh about that.
I've had a rough couple weeks. I love men. One of my best friends is a man. I'm actually half man on my dad's side. So thank you. I get it. You know, it's a rough time. But lately
I guess she's trying to draw a parallel between her saying that she's related to knows men to like people saying that black people, well, they know a black person, and I'm part Native American or something on my mom's side or something like that. It would be funny and the joke would work if her representation of herself saying these things, if she had some kind of acknowledgement that she's saying outrageous things, that her hatred of men is outrageous, but there's no nuance regarding that. There's no recognition in the performance that she knows that she's tongue-in-cheek, has a tongue-in-cheek sort of presentation of her own outrageousness. He doesn't see this as outrageous. That's why it's not funny. She thinks it's totally reasonable.
I've developed a very rational fear of men based on how you portray yourselves in person. Like if I'm walking.
Imagine if that were said about black people. I have a total fear of black people based upon how you display yourselves in person. Ha ha ha. There's a laugh from the audience.
Down the street and I see a group of businessmen, I don't know what the term is, like a fraud. If I see a scam of men in suits coming towards me, I'll find that I'll just instinctively clutch my purse and be like, don't grope me, you know?
Again, to imply that a group of people or a specific demographic is likely to commit crimes is bigotry. This woman is a bigot.
Don't grope me, I'm awake. A lot of my male friends are really nervous in this whole Me Too moment, so they're asking me for advice. And I tell them, if you're around a woman and she makes you feel nervous, just picture her clothed. Think of her as your daughter, or better yet, a person.
The total number of men who commit sexual assaults at the highest number that we've ever estimated is about 8%. 92% of men have never committed a sexual assault in their lives. To imply that men typically commit crimes is bigotry. It doesn't matter if you comply any group is typical or normal for that group to commit crimes or to fear them is bigotry. This is creating a greater problem than sexual assault itself. I can think of nothing worse for a community than to have an individual like this walk around and have people saying and sharing jokes and sharing a video where we try to promote the idea that these people, these certain people, are dangerous. They're not to be trusted. Walk on the other side of the street when they come by. That's like Nazi Hitler shit. That's like KKK shit. But she can say this, just people just think it's funny. Put it on Conan O'Brien saying this, national television. People joke about it, share it on YouTube. This is a bigot, and this should be universally despised. This is far worse than anything Don Imus said. This is 10,000 times worse than what PewDiePie said. This woman's career should be threatened by this. Not that I really give a shit. I don't care about censoring people that say stupid things. But as far as the quality of her comments, the harmful nature, the offensiveness of these comments compared to other celebrities, other media personalities who have been punished by far lesser comments, far lesser offensive comments, is ridiculous that no one is outraged by this except for a few people. And we'll show you what happens to those individuals who express outrage at this.
Thank you. Treat her as an equal. I know it sounds crazy, but then maybe she won't blog about you on a website no one's ever heard of. Babe.gov.
To imply that a demographic group is likely to be oppressive is also bigotry. It is just as much a bigotry as saying they're likely to be criminals.
Thanks, Conan. It's a tough time for men right now. It's also a tough time for women, or if there are any Republicans watching, by women, I just mean wombs. Yeah, it's a tough time for men.
Now, I'm not a Republican. I voted for Hillary Clinton. And again, I have no issue with female comedians. I love Sarah Silverman. I love the Sarah Silverman show. You can't find that many dudes who love the Sarah Silverman show. It's just not kind of a weird kind of comedy. It's actually very different, very strange compared to most comedy styles you see out there. But I loved it. It reminded me, honestly, of a little bit of Pee-wee's Playhouse in a way. A character on Sarah Silverman. She was like a grown child kind of thing. I thought it was awesome. I love Amy Schumer. I think Amy Schumer is absolutely hilarious. I love that show Broad City. So I have I'm not threatened at all by female comedians. In fact, Broad City is actually the last comedy show I binge watched because I just thought it was hilarious. I thought those little quirky women. It was a nice break to hear, comedic perspectives coming from women as opposed to the same dudes like drunk and stoned and stuff. So it was kind of cool seeing girls do that same kind of routine, and it was a lot funnier. This is just not funny. And I have no issue. No, now she's talking about Republicans. I voted for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. I don't feel ashamed of that. Obviously, she wasn't the perfect candidate. I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary, but I voted for her in the presidential election. It just isn't funny. The joke is just not funny because she's saying what her actual opinion is. There's no nuance of humor here. It's just spewing hatred on a comedy stage, and the laughs aren't ha-ha laughs. They're ha-ha laughs. They're ha-ha-ha-ha-ha laughs. So it's the reaction is it's not humor. I know that there's a certain subjectiveness to that judgment, whether something's funny or not. There's a lot of subjectiveness to it. But I don't think it's subjective to say that there is a technical difference between ha 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 ha, look at how weird the world is, or ha 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 ha, she got you people. That is just, it's not technically what she's doing. It's not that it isn't funny, not that it's bad humor. It's technically just not humor. It's just her spewing personal hatred at certain people and the audience laughing with it because they hate those people too. It's a rejoiceful laughing at the expense of the people that they don't like.
And it's also a tough time for us wombs. It's a tough time for everybody, really. Well, except Nazis. Thank you. Nazis are having a great year. They're getting glossy write-ups in the New York Times. Really just to exercising AR-15s, like Nazis. David, there?
What? What?
Charlottesville, guys dressed like dads who lost custody of their kids, prancing around a college campus they couldn't get into, exercising free speech with their AR-15s, like Nazis.
I'm not a big proponent of the Charlottesville Nazis, but how do they dress like guys who lost custody of their kids? And how is that a funny fucking thing to bring up? That is just so utterly beyond offensive to me. Dress like guys who just lost custody of their kids. That's like the worst thing she says in this video. And she says a lot of ridiculous things. If you know guys who have lost custody of their children, it's about the equivalent what they go through emotionally is a little less bad than the reaction of someone going through the death of their child. It's almost that severe. And for you to turn that into a hate humor, hate remark that we laugh at, you really need to check yourself. You're really a fucked up person.
David Duke was there. He's very hard to spot with all the plastic surgery he's had. You'd think for a white supremacist, he'd be more comfortable in his own skin. Thank you, one guy. Thank you. Our country is very...
Thank you, one guy. Like all guys are in support of the Nazis. What the fuck's that shit about? Oh my God, it's this fucking...
divided right now about what to do with this new strain of North American tiki Nazi. Do we punch them? Do we not punch them? It's tough because it's like on one hand, violence incites violence, but so do Nazis. So what do? I don't think violence is ever the answer, but I do think we need to do a better job at making Nazis feel less safe to be Nazis in America and espouse their ideology and recruit other Nazis, because that doesn't really ever work out for anyone who's not a Nazi or for Nazis. Thank you.
Okay. So there she's encouraging violence is a way to deal with people that say things that are, I mean, I say that find the things that Nazis say offensive too, but they're a small ineffectual minority group. Everybody disparages them. So they have no political clout, no political power. They're called marginalized or marginalized opinion. So I don't find anything threatening about anything they say. Nobody agrees with them, whatever. But there she's encouraging us to basically beat them up as a joke. Yeah.
It doesn't work out for Nazis either, like it's they want, you know? So here's my advice. You see a Nazi on the street, don't punch him, but maybe lightly harass him. Catcall him. Tell him to smile. If any Nazis work for you, pay them less. Take credit for their ideas. Except that one. See where this is going. If we in America treat Nazis the way we treat women, they will never become president.
Women don't become president. They don't run. And yeah, the whole implication there, it's hard to enumerate all the bigotry she'd say there, like men are in support of Nazis, men are criminals, men are prejudice, men are oppressors, guys who lose custody of their children, that's a big funny thing too. Not the least bit funny, it's freaking terrible. And then men are just like the Nazis. He's constantly comparing men to Nazis. Yeah. Next one we're going to look at is, did I look at the naked art one last time? No, I didn't. This is another really ridiculous one. Talk about women who have no understanding of the way men think whatsoever. And because they don't, they interpret everything they do in this really sinister way. This is basically what patriarchy theory causes. Patriarchy theory, if you don't understand, it's basically conflict theory applied to sexism. So it's the belief that all sexism, all prejudice that happens in a sexist society is due to a power elite trying to oppress another group, a subjugated group. And in the case of self-described feminists, they think that power elite is men, and they call that the patriarchy. Not realizing that saying that any demographic group is likely to be oppressive is about as bigoted as you can get. It's about as singling people out for mistreatment as you can possibly get. But the way that what this causes, though, this mentality, is it causes them to interpret every single thing they see in light of this patriarchy nonsense. And this article is an example of that. Yana Gatsby on the male gaze in art. Stop watching women having baths. Go away. In her new ABC show, Nakedy Nudes, the Tasmanian-born comedian delights in taking the highbrow mantle off art history. Art history taught me to have no place in history, said Hannah Gadsby in her furious, hilarious, devastating stand-up show, Nanette. I'm sure it's just devastating and hilarious. Women didn't have time to think thoughts. They were too busy taking naps naked in the forest. This is the central idea advanced in Gatsby's new two-part ABC series, Nakedy Nudes. Her thesis is that the current ideals of female body, beautiful bodies, and strict gender norms have a long past, inherited from the ancient Greeks and their Renaissance natives. Again, this is a concept of she doesn't understand how men think about anything, and she interprets all their behavior that she dislikes in terms of them trying to be oppressive, because that's how she views everything in terms of patriarchy theory, because she's a fake patriarchy theory. Men drawing women asleep is not a sign that you want to sexually abuse them or that you're in the act of getting ready to sexually abuse them. You draw them asleep as a sign of peacefulness, because having a woman who is comfortable enough, who's in your home, who has laying there calm, feels at rest, doesn't feel anxiety, feels comfortable enough that she could be naked. There's a sexual element to that, but I think really what makes those paintings appealing and what they express is just the amount of security they convey. That's a person who feels very secure, who's very protected, having a woman with you that makes you feel protected. Men, since you don't understand this, I'll try to explain how an aspect of how we think. We get a certain degree of satisfaction and comfort sociobiologically from the idea of having a woman around. It gives us a mating outlet, but it doesn't mean that we just think of her in a sexual way. We get a certain feeling of fulfillment in our lives from having protected a woman, kept her safe, kept in our home, given her a roof over her head, a place for her to flourish and feel comfortable and calm and at peace. So when men are painting these paintings of women sleeping, they're conveying a beauty and a peace in that, not conveying something evil and sinister, as this woman tries to imply here. This is a central idea. Okay, the Tasmanian born comedian who studied art history as an undergraduate has always been a master at communicating big ideas through her personal narrative. After years of touring and TV appearances, Gadsby's performance on Joshua Thompson's deeply beloved Please Like Me introduced her drolly, depressive, thinly fictionalized persona to a global audience. Sorry I'm late, she deadpanned grimly in season 4. Someone called me fat in year 3. In a stream of lucid and viral Facebook posts about the political events of the moment. From Not All Men to the Don Burke revelations to Australia's damaging pathway to magic economy and enunciating how each has resonated with her. Then came Nanette, its highly coveted Edinburgh Comedy Award, its sold-out national tour, and its forthcoming Netflix special. In the show, which shortly commences a month-long run in New York City, and will be followed by a book adaptation, she declares her retirement from the stage. I'm serious when I say that I should quit comedy. It's probably not the forum for this. By this, she means the story of her trauma, which began when she was growing up as a contested citizen in the thick of Tasmania's 1990s debate about legalizing homosexuality, a debate that left her soaked with shame. The bitter, perverse irony deprived from this clashing of anguish and gags gives Nanette a sober, moving subtext, and pushing her past into punchlines. The joke is on Gatsby, and by the show's end, the smile with which she walked on stage is gone. Nakedy Nudes picks up where the art history pronouns of that stand-up show left off and joins the dots, Gatsby says, between the concepts we've inherited from art criticism and the toxic sexist cultures being torched by the Me Too movement. The TV show, which follows Gatsby's previous ABC art documentaries, calls out what interviewee and Sydney artist Deborah Kelly says is women's overwhelming depiction as prone, boneless, and sexually available objects throughout much of Western art history, all pale, glowing limbs and Renaissance ideals. The body is to be looked at by the man, says Gatsby in the series. An artist almost always assumes to be a bloke looking at a body in the picture frame, almost always a woman, because men like looking at women. These heterosexual men do, because we find them pleasing to the eye. I don't get what the fucking problem is. How is that oppressive? Depicted as sleeping in the videos, because that's a very peaceful situation. If you know you provided for a woman and she's in your home and she's relaxed and she's asleep, there's nothing more comforting to us to know that we have a woman in our home who cares about us enough that she's spending time with us and is sleeping in our bed. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's just about being a philanderer or being Ted Danson. That's how you're interpreting this based upon, or quagmire. That's how this person's interpreting this because of her patriarchy theory. He interprets everything in that context or late. The sheer numbers of paintings and of unconscious women is distressing, he says over the phone. Most of those women are being watched by conscious men within the painting itself. And that's normalizing a very distressing thing. We see it a lot. It's good to take stock of that in light of what's happening at the moment with what people are speaking about culturally, she says, referring to the reckoning against sexual harassment and assault that has followed allegations against Harvey Weinstein. God, every freaking article I read has to fucking bring up Harvey Weinstein. If it has anything to do with gender whatsoever, it fucking brings up Harvey. This is one guy in a society of 300 million. One dude. He is not representative of men as a whole or of any kind of normal cultural phenomenon. It's one fucking dude. 1/10. 8% of men commit sexual assault. 92% don't. We need to. God, I hate it. Okay, Harvey Weinstein. We haven't invented that problem in this generation. We haven't invented it this century. This is something we've inherited and will take a long time to unpick. But it's not worth defending. Just because it's been around for centuries doesn't mean it's cool to be a creepy old man. Stop watching women sleeping. Stop watching women having baths. Go away. I don't know what the go away. I think this is just all she believes. I think you could probably put anything before the statement and it probably would express her opinions. Men, stop shaving in front of us. Stop talking in deep voices. Go away. Men, stop taking up too much space on the subway. Stop walking around with your short hair. Go away. He just doesn't want us to go away, whatever the fuck it is. But that's not what's happening in these. That's not what it's about. It's not about the women being unconscious. It's about the fact that they're at peace. They're laying there. There's a feeling of security it's conveying. If you don't understand how men think, how men see things, how men interpret the world around them, then you're going to come up with really dumb ideas about how the world works. Talking about how long this has existed, it's not cultural. It's socio-biological. Men have an internal desire to be in the company of women. And to be in the company of a sleeping woman would indicate a household, a home where you can build a family, where you can build a future, where you can build the very future of the society. If men didn't think this way and didn't have these feelings, you would not be here. Her hatred is not of men when you really analyze it. It's a hatred of sexuality, of the very biological imperatives which make us exist. We're not seeing anything new, she reiterates. The art world doesn't exist in a vacuum. Being an object, being objectified, creates a toxic culture because we don't have the same cultural influence as men do. Oh my God, fuck off. You have far more cultural influence than we do. They've written the story. They have the power. Fuck you. See, they just interpret every single thing in this patriarchy bullshit. That's how they view everything. See, as you can just see by this comment, it's revealing. She's talking about patriarchy, her patriarchy theory here, which influences her interpretation of the art world. That they're being objectified as objects, instead of being a symbol of beauty, of something that we adore or putting on a pedestal. Are the women in those art, they're drawing them. They're painting them. They're taking the time to paint someone that they want to look at over and over and over again. It isn't objectifying her. It's a painting. It's not an interview. It's a painting. It's looking at it. You're going to paint something. I mean, are you objectifying a flower when you paint the flower? Are you objectifying a landscape when you draw a landscape? No, they're drawing it because it's a magnificent person that they like to look at because they admire them. They admire women. You wouldn't draw a woman that you hate or paint a woman that you hate or want a painting of a woman that you hate everywhere. You paint women you like. You find something about them wonderful to look at. So it's flattering to women. It's a wonderful, lovely thing. It's a tribute to women, these paintings. And a tribute to men wanting to feel like they're building a home. Me Too movement should not be limited to art or TV. What's happening in the world where there is no glamour or is worse. There are powerless people in the world who don't have a voice, who are struggling in the toxic culture of silence. In the program, Gatsby interviews Australian artists, including Julia Drapp, Brooke Andrews, Ben Quilty, and Ben Henson, who through their work have, she argues, disrupted this distressing objective grand narrative of the nude. The first disruption of the medium they chose, she says, Julia Drapp uses her own body. This is a departure in and of itself because women and female bodies in art have generally been objects, so she's breaking the mold. Gatsby also speaks to Wendy Whiteley as a corroborator, not a muse, of her late husband Brett. Gatsby's voice is direct and down to earth. I don't know what's going on and on about her. Anyway, so she's seeing sleeping women as unconscious women. She's seeing women in a peaceful pose as women about to be violated in some way. She sees women who are used as art subjects to put them on a pedestal as women who are degraded by this activity. So this is just an example of how patriarchy theory just causes these people, these women, or anyone who's a patriarchy theorist, to interpret every single male behavior in some kind of negative light, some kind of evil light. We'll look at one more thing before we finish here. This is another video. And it's Tucker Carlson, who is a conservative commentary. I don't like conservatives, but we're going to look at it anyway. Beep. Come on. There we go.
A writing guide at Purdue University, accredited school, students to avoid words like mailman and mankind in order to have, quote, non-sexist, non-biased writing. Kathy Aru is founder and publisher of Catalina Magazine, and we think she agrees. And she joins us tonight. Kathy, it's great to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
I got to say, there's kind of a basic irony here. I mean, you're lecturing us about sexism while you're sitting right now in Manhattan.
Manhattan. We need to rename the city then. The Big Apple. The Big Apple would be less offensive. So I feel that I'm sitting in the Big Apple, not Manhattan.
Okay, but why stop there? Why should the post office deliver mail?
I know. Well, it's spelled M-A-I-L, so that's okay. If it's M-A-L-E, then there's a problem.
Homonyms count, and this applies to email too, because it's not about spelling, it's about being gender inclusive.
Right.
And mail is offensive. We've just learned that. So.
Well, no, I don't think they're including that, but they are saying that society has changed and times are changing, and we don't want to be offensive in our language. And they're trying to be non-sexist and non-biased, means trying to take the word man out. So made, it would be synthetic. So, and it would be male carrier. So there's many ways to ground it. In humanity, you should say people.
Male carrier has it's kind of a fake. Oh, but that's a judge.
So package carrier.
Well,
we can come up with so many other terms that are less offensive. Yeah.
You might still offend dyslexics. You can change a vowel, but it sounds the same. It has that dreaded word that sends people shrieking for their safe spaces, male.
Well, they're saying man. Man is the word that they're trying to avoid. They're saying that the word man is associated with adult men as opposed to just humanity or humans. So they're trying to avoid the word man. So if we can eliminate that word, then things would be much better and people would be less offended.
Well,
this is the fucking shit here. Man is gender neutral. It doesn't take a long time to look this shit up either. The Old English word for a male was whiffman. No, it was werman, and female was whiffman. Whiffman is where we get wife from. Man, by itself, without the whir or the whiff, was just man. Man is gender neutral. When you're looking at old statements about mankind or all of man that you would find, say, in biblical text or the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, that is a gender neutral term. It did not become common to drop the were before the man until later. So if you were trying to create a gender neutral term for gender, it already exists. Man is already a gender neutral term. The correction of this issue, I mean, I'm fine with trying to create a new society where we say, okay, we're going to use gender neutral language when it's appropriate, and use gender specific language when that's appropriate. And we obviously want gender neutral language for certain things. But man already is a gender neutral term. The issue is that you have to restore the werman, which would be the gender specific term for a man. You have to restore that, not get rid of man. And it only takes 2 seconds to look this shit up. Woman is just a goddamn ignoramus. Okay. This is the article right here. It's right out of Wikipedia. In Old English, were and whiff and whiffman were used to refer to a man and a woman respectively, while man had the primary meaning of adult male human. It could also be used for gender neutral purposes, as the case with modern German man, corresponding to pronoun in English utterance. One does what one must. Some etymologies treat the root as the independent one, as does the American Heritage Dictionary. Of the etymologies that do make connections with other Indo-European roots, man the thinker is the most traditional. That is, the word is connected with the root men, to think, cognate, to mind. This etymology relies on humans describing themselves as those who think, the human self-reflection. Etymology, however, is not generally accepted. A second potential etymology connects to Latin manus, hand, which has the same form as the Sanskrit manus. But anyway, man is the neutral term. If we were trying to fix the language so we have a word for man, a word for woman, and then a word for everybody, then the word would be werman for man, withman for women, which developed into woman. So we'll keep the woman. Woman, werman, which is what I am. So coming from one werman to all you men means people. This is Coffee and Propaganda. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this, whatever this is.